Welcome to the Scapegoats podcast. Here are your hosts, Matt Dimitro and Jordan Duran. To the goats.
That's definitely where everybody turns us off. It's like, these fucking jokers.
After we die, if there's enough tape of us on the internet, our consciousness gets reborn through artificial intelligence.
Everybody dies, but not everybody lives.
Do you think I should take out the part where I said
they all loved it? That's some good content.
The following is intended solely for entertainment purposes and is not to be taken as financial or professional advice. The views presented are loosely held positions of the host and in no way represent any organization with which they are affiliated.
See that Ron DeSantis was at the UFC fight yesterday?
I did not. What was he? Was he really into it?
He wasn't. That was the funny part, is the camera, because, you know, UFC constantly switches camera mode for each of the fights. Like, they would show him in the front row, and half the time he was on his phone, other than when they like directly cut to him. My thought was like, Ron DeSantis needs every ounce of like bro points he can get. And so showing up to the UFC fight felt just like a natural fit for it.
Probably just trying to make a couple comments to Joe Rogan, trying to get on the podcast. I'm not sure he enjoyed watching the human backpack just put that guy in, put Peter Yan into a body triangle for half the fight.
Yeah, who do you think he wanted to win there? It must have been really tough. Like, does he want the Russian to win, or does he want the black guy to win? He must be so conflicted.
Yeah, nobody wanted the Russian guy to win, so I hope that he was on the right side there. But that's hilarious that he went to the UFC fight. Doesn't he have other things to do on a Saturday night? I guess not. Yeah. Not in Jacksonville.
Tell some kids that they shouldn't be wearing masks standing right behind him.
And then, tell them not to go get vaccinated. That's crazy. Ron DeSantis, I feel it. Do you think that he is going to run in 2024?
Extremely. I feel like we're on that crash course where he's kind of setting himself up to be the Ted Cruz type figure of 2024, where he's buddy with Trump, but there's a natural schism when they both become the last two people remaining. Like that feud's going to go apeshit.
I agree. It's going to be just crazy disinformation on both sides. Trump will be coming at DeSantis like his dad killed JFK. DeSantis will be saying that Trump, was never a good wrestler in the WWE. But I think he's got a shot. And I think he's going to raise obviously a lot more institutional support than Trump possibly could.
Did you see that the new, I guess, mainstream MSM type narrative is that Trump is going to raise a bunch of money going up to the 2024 election and then cite health reasons as why he can't run and just pocket all the cash?
That is such an MSNBC conspiracy theory. That's exactly what I would expect them to be reporting about Trump. I kind of don't think he'll run again. I think he really has lost like a little bit of institutional support that somehow gave him the benefit of the doubt last time. But hey, he's unpredictable and it could happen. I don't know what the Democrats are going to do. I mean, we've talked about that, right? It seems like they have no good options.
Talk about such a low bench. I feel like the one shining light, and he got completely crushed in the primary. So I don't know if there's even a base that he can draw on, but Cory Booker looked fairly good in the Ketanji Jackson hearings. He gave his, I cry about it spiel, and
yeah, he definitely, I saw at least the end of his speech, and it was very impassioned. I don't know. I think Cory Booker kind of personifies the performative Democrats in a certain sense, which, hey, I mean, that might, win in 2024. I don't know. I mean, he's pretty middle of the road, I feel like, as far as Democrats go, but I know that he'll lead into all the identity stuff really hard, which isn't so attractive in that I think it's super divisive.
I feel like Cory Booker has never said any words not thinking that they were the most impactful words to be ever uttered in the English language. Like, he even says it with that look that's like, Can you believe how smart I am?
His eyes widen like a sociopath, that's for sure.
He's got that swamp monster feel to him, shaved head, a little greasy.
I think the interesting thing about the next election is that probably, again, both parties are going to claim that they won, and it's probably going to be even more contentious this next time. I mean, we've seen some really crazy stuff come out over the past 2 weeks. The New York Times confirmed the Hunter Biden laptop story. And so that was kind of crazy after 50 former intelligence officials came out, or this is what they said happened after that story was released right before the 2020 election. And they said this has to be Russian disinformation. But when it turns out it was actually our own intelligence community running an information operation. And then this past week, we find out that this kidnapping attempt for when they tried to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer was, the two guys who were actually being tried there. They got totally acquitted. And the other people who were involved in it were all FBI informants. So it seemed like that was another thing to drum up, there's extremist elements on the right before the election. I don't know what it says about, the two political parties, but it's pretty creepy to see the intelligence community, really trying to sway public opinion in that way.
The fact that they took what is probably like a direct to video National Treasure offshoot and just substituted Gretchen Whitmer for the Constitution in that spiel is hilarious to me. It would have been even funnier if they actually executed on the plot, but it sounds like it was just one big nothing burger, if nothing else. But man,
yeah,
nothing like swinging by and dropping the governor off in the back seat.
It would have been crazy if they actually went through with it, and then you find out that it was a FBI operation. I mean, it's interesting that we really, there's so much that's been said about disinformation and misinformation, and it's the real reality of it is you just can't believe everything you read online, and that statement needs to be trumpeted out to people these days. Another thing we had to happen this past week was Elon Musk joining the board of Twitter. I think that, I woke up, I saw that on my phone. I knew, it was obviously he had already purchased the stake, but he had originally said he was going to be a passivist investor. I woke up, I saw that on my phone. I got stoked. I was so excited. I was like, wow, there's a chance that free speech makes a comeback in the United States. But I mean, but all the, mainstream media has been like, oh, this guy's just going to try to ban people that he doesn't like. What do you think about Elon joining the board?
First thing that I absolutely loved about it is that, and this is totally consistent with how he just operates as a person, but his initial tweets after joining the board and taking the 9% or whatever stake, the one that was should we remove the W in Twitter? It was a Twitter poll. And it's yes, of course. I just love the high octane trolling that guy spits out, starting the feud with Michael Burry about whether or not he was verified and being I'll give you back your blue check, even though you shorted Tesla, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, that's the thing. Elon's being hilarious about this. And the fact of the matter is that all the criticism that, the media and I guess the SEC and the employees at Twitter want to throw at him it's not going to stick because he's made the investment and it's his money that's on the line and it's a risk. It's interesting. It's definitely something where you could argue that that it's a way that someone could abuse power. But on the other hand, look at who's on the board already. It's run by, pretty much BlackRock, Vanguard, Elliott Management. Why do we think that it's any less controlling to have another ideology at the helm that's, wrapped itself in the banner of ESG? To me, that doesn't make any sense. And the guy who's actually said that he's a free speech absolutist and who, has, his whole life, he said, he really admires Benjamin Franklin. To me, it makes no sense why he gets smeared. I mean, this is the guy who did more for renewable energy being adopted than just about anybody else in the United States. To me, it's bonkers.
His heel turn, shifting from Hollywood Hulk Hogan to NWO Hulk Hogan over the past 18 to 24 months has been interesting to watch. His public persona feel like it's gone complete 180 from his Steve Jobs, savior type complex pre-pandemic to now being someone to lambast on the left as just an evil corporate billionaire who only thinks of himself, despite the fact that he's, runs the world's leading renewable company, has proliferated his cars across roads all over America. Like, it's funny how public perception can turn on a dime for folks like that. And this feels like the natural pivot point for him to, further his ideas in a way that, is net better for all of us, like suspending Trump's Twitter account. Do you think Trump comes back?
I don't know if Trump comes back. I think that there's a lot of forces within Twitter that are trying to prevent that. I mean, do I think he should be able to come back? Yeah, he's not in power right now. The rules around inciting violence, it's kind of like a weird, line. Like where do you draw that? It's not that it's arbitrary necessarily, but I mean, if you're talking about a lifetime ban for someone, that seems to not really, jive with what the rules should be. I don't see why Trump just doesn't make a burner account and come back with an alt.
Fake Donald Trump. You know that guy has planned his first tweet back for like a good year and a half now.
Yeah. He's going to come back and like say that Twitter is saved now. God. See.
Speaking of governors, did you see Greg Abbott was like, we're going to take all the migrants from Texas. It's totally the Patrick Star meme. How about we take migrants in Texas and put them in DC?
I did see this. Yeah. He said they're just going to bus all the people that are crossing the border up to the steps of the Capitol, which I don't know what kind of a message it's going to send to people, but it's exactly the Patrick Star thing. That's hilarious.
I mean, is the guy not thinking about rising gas prices? Like, that would be an excellent idea when gas is $1.50, but.
Oh, no, you're mistaken. He's sending them on electric buses.
Thanks, Elon.
Straight from the Austin Gigafactory.
So wild. Like, it's crazy how immigration has become this political boogeyman for the right to just, perpetually harp on as, the ultimate end all be all for all the societal ills that come with it in a world in which, the population matrix is clearly upending in the US. We're about to have a shit ton more of septuagenarians and sociopathic grandfathers from Omaha. Like, it doesn't feel like now is the time to be stemming the tide of immigration to the US.
We'll get to Warren Buffett in a minute, but yeah, it's definitely, there's a nativist sort of element to the Republican Party where they think that they can take advantage of this populist sentiment by appealing to ideas that there's this culture that needs to be preserved. I think that's a dangerous idea. And I agree that if you just look at, what's happening in reality and on the ground, we definitely need immigration. I mean, the fertility or the birth rate has declined like substantially since COVID. And that's, and like you said, as soon as we have the social security time bomb going off, when there's all these septuagenarians and octogenarians that are continue to get older and just have us, rebalance towards that way, it's definitely going to be a period where we need to, allow more people that are younger and looking to actually pursue things to come here. And, the other thing on top of that is that we should definitely start attracting people of, really high intellectual caliber. We need to take advantage of any sort of brain drain, especially from Russia. It seems to me like we're probably stopping all immigration from Russia right now, but we should try to get like the smartest people we can over here, as long as they're not, working for the Kremlin.
Not Peter Yan, What was crazy about Ron DeSantis being at the UFC fight is the whole card top to bottom was full of immigrants. Like, there wasn't a single US fighter that was easy to, rest your laurels on. I'm sure there were a couple, but interspersed. But if you judge solely by the walkout music, it was a freaking UN conference at UFC 273.
There's no sport that's more global. You give a chance for any fighter from anywhere to come. UFC is a place to do it. Yeah,
a little bit of a side note, but I really dislike all of the like home country walk up music. Like, this is America. You got to come out to Kanye or Jay-Z or something crazy. Like, I don't get hype here in your bagpipes, dude. Chill out.
It's definitely better when you hear like a song that you know and you're like, oh, that's a good walkout song. But yeah, most of them are kind of like, what is this music? I don't understand it. And so what is this like throat singing?
Yeah, they're like dancing on the way to the ring. Like nothing makes me want to fade a fighter more than coming out to like some home country bullshit. Like
this conversation is quickly deteriorating into us supporting the Republican nativist position. That's not what we're trying to do here. Yeah, pro immigration. Yeah, man, it's crazy that there's all this stuff going on. I mean, there's all these populist sentiments in the parties are just, some of them are just wild. It's like paradoxical in that you can see people on the right who are supporting a Russian invasion in Ukraine. You see people on the left who like are war hawking, that we get further into this war. I thought it was really interesting that this past week started off with war crimes claims about the murders that happened in Bucha. I don't know if that's how you say that town's name. It sounds like kombucha. It seems right to me. But then later in the week, we saw that Finland and Sweden were actually like trying to advance their NATO applications, which to me seems really escalatory. But some people would say that it's kind of like deterrence. What's your take on that?
Funny that Putin invaded a country to make sure that NATO didn't creep up to his border. And now we have both NATO troops being deployed right on the border of Russia and incremental countries seeking to join NATO, in which most likely serving as a conduit to put further forces on the Russian flank. If there was any sort of like double down from Putin's position, this just screams escalation.
It does. And I mean, I get the argument, right? That he's, that Putin's weak now. Their economy it's been hit with this iron curtain, and they've been sort of depleted in Ukraine, if we're to believe any of the information that comes out in the West. And yeah, so like, adding Finland and Sweden could add another, Western front for them, essentially. And it could be dangerous in the sense that Putin could really escalate and go for the nukes. I think people are not really realizing that he's not the type to fold. He'll raise you all in, right? Even if it means utter destruction for him.
Crazy to me that now a month and a half into the conflict, aside from the, I think it was the hypersonic missile that was used in Ukraine, there hasn't been any sort of advancement to any proverbial or metaphorical red line, such as biological weapons, chemical weapons, some sort of low yield nuclear weapon. It feels like those options are ready and apparent as next courses of action if, the current tides continue.
Certainly. And I mean, the other thing that's happening that might be, making Putin pause is that China is currently, experiencing a ton of trouble with COVID. They're having a ton of lockdowns in Shanghai, and apparently it's spreading to other provinces now. I think over 100 million people were locked down. There were some pretty horrific videos coming out on Twitter, so discount the truth value there. But on these videos coming out of Shanghai where people are locked in their apartments. I mean, I saw a video that was absolutely heartbreaking where they were literally killing all of the pets that there were in Shanghai. Like they had them in just like bags on the sidewalks. And I mean, if this stuff is happening, you gotta look at that and say like, yeah, like these authoritarian governments that people have been claiming are so efficient and have, accomplished so much. It's not all butterflies and rainbows. It's definitely scary. And then it's obviously strategically a disadvantage for Putin because he needs Chinese demand to buy commodities, to skirt sanctions and such. And also to probably get, to import stuff that they need they probably need some food security from there as well. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a really fraught situation that seems to be deteriorating on multiple fronts.
Food scarcity point feels like an interesting one, especially juxtaposed with what you just said about the pets being slaughtered en masse. If I know anything about Chinese people, having Fido in a bag feels like an excellent opportunity to make some egg drop soup with a little bit of dog in the side. Like,
well, if you believe Dr. Fauci, that's how the pandemic got started.
Just some pangolins, it's hilarious how we've like completely shifted our origin story on the pandemic, from being like, wet market to maybe it was some sort of mutation within humans to it's probably some lab leak. And now if you think anything other than that, you're part of the counterculture.
Right. Yeah. This was one of the great examples of where misinformation ended up being, just a scare tactic. And yeah, I mean, if we get back to, the theme we were talking about earlier, that's the kind of stuff that people were literally getting kicked off Twitter, kicked off YouTube for saying, even though months later, you have New York Times reporting it, you have the mainstream institutions reporting it. I personally think that that the internet should be more like a town square where, people can go and they can say crazy shit. And, maybe I like Jack Dorsey's idea that there could be a Wild West Twitter and then a normal Twitter. I personally think that everybody would just go to the Wild West Twitter because that's how people work. Like, who wants to hang out on censored Twitter?
Who keeps safe search on when they Google shit?
Exactly. I mean, parents, I guess. Maybe there should be a kid's version of Twitter or like an under 18 version. I don't know about that.
like YouTube Kids, where it's like the Peppa the Pig cartoons slowly devolve into like videos about Peppa the Pig getting slaughtered for bacon meat.
Right. That was like the original Pizzagate QAnon theory right there. It was the YouTube algorithm was like kind of doing some scary shit for a little while there.
Would you, if you were having a kid today, how early in their development do you make them an iPad baby, if at all?
I have mixed feelings because on the one hand, I think that, kids have all this neuroplasticity and who knows, maybe he could take this iPad and end up creating like some, I don't know, artificial general intelligence and, just going off and like, doing crazy things, selling a ton of millions of dollars worth of NFTs. That would be awesome. And, maybe a 7-year-old could do that if they were really a savant. But on the other hand, I think that, there's something to be said for like developing in a normal way, not with a screen in your face all the time or being, addicted to certain types of algorithms, right? Because a lot of these companies that make these apps, they literally employ psychologists that teach you how to addict someone. So yeah, I'd probably try to wait. What about you? What would you do in that situation?
Because on one hand, you definitely like the idea of having a built-in babysitter that, is a fixed cost and you can always rely on it to distract them. But on the other hand, giving a child an internet device feels like a short road to just deviant behavior. You never know what's going to go into that kid's mind, especially once they get like school age on the early side of it, where, they're discovering things like pornography and different, person-to-person interaction type issues, like discovering about race and socializing them with a device that is basically a black hole to the rest of the world. It feels a little spooky. I would love if my kid came to me and was like, Dad, I'm just made millions on GameStop stock. That seems like the best way to run it. But aside from giving them Robin Hood kids, I don't know how you square that circle.
Actually, yeah, maybe we should get into markets a little bit. We had the Fed come out this past week. They had their Fed minutes and they were pretty hawkish. They said they were going to start reducing the balance sheet by like $95 billion a month over the coming next few months. And it sounded like, 50 basis point rate hikes were the next thing on the table. But somehow the market kind of just looked through all this and they were like, yeah, it's kind of what we had in mind. It's not intensely like super hawkish. Like they're not calling for a 75 basis point hike. I think that was a little weird because, equity valuations are still pretty high. We've seen consumer credit really, exploded during this past, during February. It went up $41 billion. It was only expected to go up like 10 billion. And then we saw that retail spending started slowing down too. It was slower than expected. So to me, all of that screams that we're in a stagflation period right now, right? Like the economy is stagnating. We've got higher inflation. And I mean, it's making things more expensive without, more productivity happening. I guess my question is, where do you think the economy is headed over the next few months? Do you think the Fed is, doing enough to quelch inflation? And just general thoughts.
Short answer is no, definitely not inflation, because across all sort of goods that are purchased by, your average consumer, it feels like that 8% bogey is the low water mark for a lot of price increases over the past, say, year or so, looking at owner's equivalent rent, food costs being in the double digit scale. That 8% number feels like it significantly undershoots. And I think the next CPI print is going to be pretty telling on that question, particularly when it bakes in all the effects of the energy cost run up from the Ukraine conflict and all the myriad deglobalization effects that have been knock-on factors after the fact. I think that the market is starting to look through said rate hikes and contemplate the initial easing of monetary policy on the after side of it. It feels like that's the next trend that the market is trying to capture. How do you feel there?
I agree. I think that there will be kind of like a look through sort of period. But the thing is, we have earnings that are about to happen now. I think that the outlook, so the banks are reporting this week. And then we'll start getting stuff like healthcare and tech, and then the more cyclical stuff and transportation. I think that this earnings season is going to look a little scary to the market, because you're going to see margins compressing, you're going to see growth expectations slowing, and so when companies start saying that they're going to be making less money and less profits because they have higher costs, then and there's lower demand, then you see the market's going to have to price something else. The market's already priced 9 rate hikes happening this year. They've already priced the Fed doing quite a bit of tightening, but they haven't priced in growth really slowing down, because they think that the economy's hot right now. We've seen the inflation, or we've seen the unemployment rate go to a low since the pandemic started, so the market's already priced in rates moving up, but they haven't priced in growth slowing down. And as we see that growth stagnating, as the forward guidance starts looking like there's going to be a recession, I think there's going to be a period where there's a little bit more volatility before we start actually looking through to the other side and start saying like, hey, maybe there's rate cuts in 2024, which could very well be the case.
How do you think about investor positioning right now, particularly from the institutional side, where net longs for hedge funds are at something like 10 or 15th percentile? The sentiment recordings are all bearish to extremely bearish. Do those serve as natural floors to any sort of correction or crash that could happen in equity markets?
I think so. The way that I look at positioning generally right now is that value stocks are like kind of the place to be, right? It's just the environment we're in with rates going up. Discounting growth, growth in the future back to right now is going to be more and more expensive as rates go up, and that growth is going to be harder to come by as we go into a recessionary period. So I think you want to look at companies where they have, as Warren Buffett would say, the moat around them, such that they have barriers to entry, they have different strategic advantages against their competitors, and they have the ability to raise pricing power on their customers. Now, on the other hand of that actually brings me to an interesting topic, which was that there was a Bitcoin conference this past week in Miami, and Peter Thiel gave a talk, which you referenced earlier, where he called Warren Buffett a sociopathic grandpa from Omaha, which is a pretty funny description of him. If you think about, what he's done throughout his career, he's basically, gotten out of the philanthropy trap by saying that he just give it all away at the end. It's like these compound returns are doing so much for society. You might actually look at him and think it's a little bit sociopathic the way that he ran his partnership and everything. And then the flip side of that is that, maybe that's just what being a good businessman is. But it's a really interesting idea, that essentially that there's this gerontocracy that's in control, that he included Larry Fink in that discussion as well, who's the CEO of BlackRock, and who's essentially been the biggest, supporter of this whole ESG movement, which Thiel called a hate factory for naming enemies, which is interesting, in his own right in terms of the political philosophy he's referencing there. But even more so, just the fact that we're going to start seeing people railing against ESG, and ESG is also kind of proven to be like sort of fake, like throughout this Russian crisis. Like there were a ton of ESG funds that held Russian bonds, that held Russian companies. A lot of ESG is just slapping a good label on something, saying like, hey, yeah, this company does a shitty thing, but they have a diverse workforce, so they have a decent ESG score. I don't really think that's fair, and I think that a lot of ESG is just political ideology that they've found a way to downstream into capital investment.
It's clear that was the 2019 or 2018 to call it 2021 topic du jour, where that was the way to increase investment dollars coming through the fold, where you can raise things like an ESG fund for private equity vehicles or tag investments as environmental friendly. But we're seeing those knock-on effects happen in real time right now. That's arguably a main catalyst for the big run-up in energy prices over the past, call it 2 or 3 months, outside of the Ukraine conflict, where, we haven't put enough wells in the ground. There are a ton of dormant wells sitting in the Permian where a lot of this less capitalized upstream producers have been crowded out post shale bust in 2015, 2016, where these investment dollars that are tagged to a political ideology only create price run-ups in the future because they circumvent additional capital flowing into these companies.
Yeah, and if you look what the Biden administration has done, as soon as the gas prices have gone up so much, they turned to literally the worst possible ESG type organizations that you could imagine, like the Saudi Arabian government, like Venezuela, like these places where and like Iran, places where dictators have really been ruling them with some really outlandish ideologies, and essentially saying that he's going to try to get them to pump more oil to make up for what's happening with Russia, when they've definitely hobbled production here at home to all the points that you just made. I mean, and also they've stopped several pipelines from being open that would have been tremendously helpful right now, like the Keystone. Not to say that should happen, but it's just an example of where the administration has slowed down the movement of oil and gas. And yeah, I mean, I think this SPR release, right, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, we're releasing 180 million barrels over the next 6 months out of a total of 560 million barrels is a huge change to our strategic priorities. And I'm not sure if it really lines up, with solving the energy problems that we have at home, right? There's nothing that's energy secure about that. It's kind of just like a short-term solution.
Talk about what will, continue to catalyze traditional or fossil fuel type source energy prices going forward is the fact that new developments for, say, solar or wind farms have only gotten more expensive due to deglobalization of the supply chains. The fact that a lot of the producers are concentrated in specific areas that are persona non grata to us right now, China, Southeast Asia et al. The fact that those plants or those new developments are becoming less profitable for the producers in the U.S. or Western nations more generally only is going to further catalyze traditional fossil fuel prices. It feels like a spiral, which there's not a clear answer in and out of this commodity super cycle that we seem to find ourselves in.
It's definitely one of the biggest kind of questions of our time, which is this energy transition. And to your point, yeah, it's something where you really have to have balance between trying to shift over your resources that you have available to you and the resources that the economy is already running on. Because the thing that people often forget is that gas and gasoline is not just what you see at the pump. It's petrochemicals are used in so many different things across the economy, from all types of packaging to in manufacturing to shipping and transit to planes flying. I mean, there's so many different inputs that get hit here, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely something where you have to balance it. I mean, I'm pretty pro renewable energy, but I'm also pro innovation in the space, right? I think that a lot of the, I think there was actually misinformation around nuclear energy for a long time that came from environmental groups, when in reality, it's one of the cleanest energy sources you could have. And I mean, the thing that's really positive in this space is that nuclear fusion has actually seen some advancements, and that could be here within the next 10 years. To me, it seems like technology is the way out of these problems. I don't see why we try to just force ourselves into this kind of degrowth mindset where we try to slow down the industrialization of the globe because we think that we're going to be destroying it, when in reality we can come up with new ideas that solve problems for us. And like the same thing with carbon capture. I think there have been several discoveries now where they've created bacteria that convert carbon dioxide in the atmosphere into something like acetone, so like a useful byproduct. And I think stuff like that, there's going to be way more coming out about it. Obviously, there's huge investments going into that field. I mean, it's something that Bill Gates invests in a lot in his own personal family fund, the Cascade. And yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of innovation there. I think that's going to end up solving a lot of the problems. But nobody wants to believe that. Everyone wants to believe the doomsday scenario that, we're running into apocalypse right now and we have 10 years. And, that type of fear mongering is not actually conducive to solving problems.
Especially not conducive to solving problems when the thesis around not understanding why U.S. or American consumers need to tighten the belt in terms of their energy expenditures here, when countries like China, Russia, et al. Are some of the leading contributors to carbon emissions in the U.S. When you think of the world as a global apparatus, which is tautological, obviously, it resonates, at least with me, that any sort of steps that I take to, not throw away coffee cups or not use disposable water bottles, that is all feel-good measures at best. When in the grand scheme of things, it's the actions of these other countries that are really going to move the needle there. And frankly, we've made no diplomatic progress on that front. In fact, we pushed them away with this Ukraine conflict. And anything to subvert that here at home is folly at best.
Yeah. A lot of it ends up being like culture war. Like, right. I do think, I mean, it's a similar argument about democracy that a totally rational actor would never actually vote in a democracy because they know that their action has, no actual impact on the outcome of the election. But you need all the people together to vote to actually have like a fair election emerge. I guess it's a similar sort of thing when it comes to climate responsibility. But at the same time, I mean, to your point, there's just bigger forces at play here. I think China has done a mass propaganda campaign, it seems like, to say that they've really, done the most when it comes to environmental concerns, when in reality, they've missed all their benchmarks. They're investing more in coal power than any other, domicile, any other region right now. And they're just doing it all. They're kind of like a power maximalist. They're doing any type of energy project that they can, which they kind of have to for such a big population. But it's definitely concerning that, people believe that countries like those are ahead of the United States, when in reality, they're just trying to get ahead. They're self-serving in a certain way. They're self-interested. There's definitely a ton of problems around that right now.
Population point feels super key here because, like you said earlier, with China locking down 100 million people, that would be a third of the United States right now. That's literally just the Shanghai region in China, right? Like, yep. They need all weapons at their disposal. Whereas we kind of sit here in our Americanized, westernized ivory tower and are able to cast down or look down upon them for all of their energy consumption, when in actuality, she's just trying to keep the wheels moving.
Exactly. And yeah, so, I mean, on the one hand, it's bad that they're, really doing bad things for the environment. On another hand, it's bad that they're convincing people that they're not doing things that are bad for the environment. And then on the final, position is just that they kind of have to do what they have to do to provide for their people. And that's obviously the ideology that Xi is going to follow. But China's facing like other, crazy stuff right now too. Like this property crisis there has kind of gone away from the mainstream, news cycle, but it's worsening. Like it's gotten worse. Like home sales are down even more. Debts are still coming due. Evergrande had like a $2 billion, they had $2 billion in assets in like this one account that just got reclaimed by one of their lenders, and they were just like, what? We didn't know that was going to happen. And so it's a very, very complicated situation there where the economy they're trying to grow it as much as possible. Right now it's like an election year essentially, where Xi is going before the Politburo and trying to cement himself into this lifetime leader. He's already gotten the approval to do that, but it remains to be seen whether they'll actually elect him to that. This is just the small ruling class of people in China that'll make the election, not like a broad democracy, of course. But it's interesting to see because he's obviously has incentives to like really invest in the economy to make them grow as much as possible right now. But it seems like what he's done really is he's just consolidated power. He's taken out a bunch of the tech CEOs there that have become very wealthy. He's taken out a bunch of the property guys that have become very wealthy. And now it's like, who's even going to challenge him, right? He's got his, arms in every single part of the Chinese society. And he's able to completely control information there. He has control of all the data, and he's even getting control of data in the United States through something like TikTok, where they're promoting algorithms that are different from what they promote at home. right? In the app that they have in China that's equivalent to TikTok, they're promoting like, scientific discovery and like national pride. Whereas in the United States, you get, I don't know, people dancing and doing drugs.
Can you imagine the conversations that are had in ByteDance HQ, where it's like an analyst comes to his director and is like, I found this new discovery. Americans love white girls shaking their asses.
I feel like that conversation might have actually happened.
Completely groundbreaking, but it's very pertinent on the Xi front, especially with him getting that quote unquote lifetime power status, where it feels like the impetus for him to have a legacy defining moment, such as Mao fighting off the rebels or Deng opening up relations with the West. Like, it feels like his immediate next step legacy wise, if all of these authoritarians think with an eye towards how they are remembered, has to be Taiwan.
That's scary. That's super scary. Do you think that he would attack, sooner than later with what's happened with Russia and Ukraine? Or do you think that that's kind of put him off?
I have two minds on it. The first being that, never waste a good crisis. And the fact that the world is rapidly realigning towards axes of power right now, akin to, a World War III type situation, does seem fairly conducive to outsized action in the South China Sea or in Taiwan. But the second arm of it is that it's very clear that the CCP thinks in decades, not years. And I don't think that they would rush to make a defining stance towards Taiwan without really thinking about all the knock-on consequences and the fact that I think there is political will, at least in the U.S., to defend Taiwan because of how scapegoated China has been basically on both parties now at this point.
There definitely is. I mean, and there's a huge geopolitical component there too, in that Taiwan is, the number one manufacturer of semiconductors. And obviously we're trying to do a ton of investment right now to like bring to onshore some of that manufacturing capacity, but it takes a long time to build up manufacturing sites. To build a foundry, it takes probably like 4 to 5 years at least. And because first you have to build like the shell and it has to be super clean. To build an actual semiconductor, you have to have very rigorous standards in place, and because otherwise dust will get in it or something, and then the electrons will mess up. Essentially, that's a very simplified way to put it, but that's part of what they're doing when they're building these foundries. And then the other part is that they have to get a ton of these essentially laser machines to be able to etch semiconductors, and those are really hard to come by too, because there's only one company that makes them, which is this Dutch company called ASML. And so but Taiwan has the TSMC, which is their huge semiconductor manufacturer. And it's really interesting because here at home there's a bill right now before Congress called the CHIPS Act, which is supposed to boost this competitiveness and invest $50 billion in domestic semiconductor manufacturing capacity, but it's getting held up. And it's really kind of worrisome that they won't vote on this. They won't get it done. People like Bernie Sanders have come out and said that this is just corporate handouts, when if you look at the wide scale global picture and you look at the reality of geopolitical forces, we need to have that semiconductor capacity in order to stay competitive on the global stage. Otherwise, we get held hostage over something like Taiwan, and forced into some type of conflict like that. I think the smoothest way this whole thing could end is if we, get all of our geopolitical priorities in order over here. We get our, the manufacturing that we need. We get our reliance on Taiwan taken care of, and then we don't go to war over it. That would be the best way to go about it. And it's too bad for the people of Taiwan, but it might be inevitable.
Too bad for the people of Taiwan. They did kind of lose a war in the 1940s, and thinking of themselves as the real China is only a farce that we have allowed them to operate under for the past, call it 70 years. If I was Xi, I would be looking at TSM being down 20-25% from the highs and being like, why don't I just scoop that up in my Robinhood account? Buy some calls, just get leverage on it. Never invade.
Yeah, I think if you actually looked into the legal structure of what those, TSMC ADRs are, which go through like some special purpose vehicle in the Caymans, that Xi would not be able to actually exert any control over it.
That subject, sorry, not to cut you off, but isn't it wild that that ADR kind of quasi equity ownership in these Chinese companies, A, has seen like a massive crush in all these Chinese tech companies over the past, call it 2 or 3 months. But B, going back to the Buffett shit talking, Charlie Munger has a massive stake in Baba that he has like something crazy, like a $250 per share cost basis. Last I checked, Baba was around like 110, 115. That guy has gotten crushed on that position, notwithstanding the fact that he has no tangible equity claim to the company.
Wow. I didn't realize that Charlie Munger had that huge position. It's really weird how, a lot of people in the quote unquote finance gerontocracy have positions in China. BlackRock has, $1 trillion invested in China too. They're trying to essentially, bring Western ideals to the country by, putting money in it. But really all they're doing is they're giving them capital, because there's no way they're going to be able to, separate out the political power that Xi has from the things that they're investing in, because he could just walk in there and take it essentially. And this is something that's just, people don't really understand, but like in a country like that, the state has the ultimate power and they can just take the assets. And it's happened before. It's happened in plenty of places. I mean, even in the United States, we just had this whole thing where we auctioned off the C-band, which is this band of radio waves that satellite companies can use to beam down, internet information. And it was auction. It was given away to a European company called Intelsat, like in the early 90s. And now we realize that it could actually be useful for 5G and other things. And so we just took it back. They just took it back and they essentially said, yeah, remember how we agreed to give this to you? It's ours now. And then they auctioned it off for I guess a profit for the government. And yeah, I mean, that company had a ton of trouble with their bonds. Like, they were trading in distress for a long time. I mean, so it's just that kind of thing. And it's at a much higher scale and much higher magnitude when you look at something like China.
Not the US government runs their own prop desk.
Yeah, they have an account at the Fed. It's a Robinhood account, actually.
Jay Powell is just pulling the levers, probably selling calls on the S&P, honestly. On the subject of needing internet in my apartment, the amount of 5G shit posting on the internet is absolutely wild. I was looking into getting 5G internet access at my apartment, and I shit you not, if you Google 5G or go on Reddit for that matter, even asking like innocuous questions like who's the best 5G provider for this zip code or whatever, half of the responses are like, did you get the vaccine? You should have already gotten 5G access.
That's hilarious. Man, 5G is, the weird thing about it is like once you get it in your phone, at least in LA, it's not that great. It hasn't like improved my service all that much over LTE, whereas LTE was a big jump over 3G. So, I mean, maybe the 5G truthers have have hit on a kernel there.
Much of that do you think is either A, diminishing returns, or B, a broader marketing ploy for this upgraded technology?
I think it's somewhat, yeah. So it's a little bit of both. I mean, definitely A, there's some diminishing returns there. And then B, there's been a ton of marketing behind it. And then I would add C, that they just haven't actually built out the 5G networks all the way yet. And that there's like more infrastructure that needs to be done, because a lot of cell towers still aren't operating with 5G. Like you'll see your phone switch between LTE and 5G all the time, at least where I am. So yeah, I think it still needs to get built out, and like hopefully it'll be quick. But at the same time, they're also already talking about 6G, which makes me think there's definitely some like diminishing returns here. And there's only so much information that you can fit into a radio wave essentially, or into yeah. So who knows? I mean, it's hard to say how fast we can get these mobile devices going. They're already pretty fast, but who doesn't like a little more speed?
Watch all the movies right fucking now.
I would like to download just everything at once. That's great. Just download all of Netflix's content. That should be
all of the Escape Ghost podcasts.
Yes. The fans need 5G.
We're pro-vaccine for that very reason.
Get your vaccine and you'll automatically start hearing this podcast. It's like you remember when iTunes like put the new U2 album just like on everybody's phone at once. Everyone was like, "What the fuck? Why do I have this?" It was like after U2's prime. So
yes. At what point do I want like the fully commercialized U2 just trying to pay the bills type releases. Like if you're going to push a U2 album to me, like I want like Sunday, Bloody Sunday. I only play the hits.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I would listen to a new U2 album if it came out today. Probably not.
Because Bono is a performative leftist activist.
Exactly. I can't. He's funded by George Soros.
We cracked him.
Speaking of funded by George Soros, did you see that they're extending the student loan moratorium?
I did. It feels like that is going to be the like shitty equivalent of the October surprise in 2022, where Biden like wakes up one day and is like, all my kiddies in debt. We're done. Papa Joe's going to come save you. And it's going to be some like nominal amount that really doesn't affect that many people, like 10 grand, all just to like show face that we, delivered on a campaign promise.
It totally seems like a midterms move. You're so right that he could totally just come in before the midterms and be like, guess what? No more student debt. And everyone would be like, no way. He finally did it. Even though I think that people with student loans only represent like 10% of the population. And definitely some of those are like actually predatory loans where people just got shitty degrees and they should never have been funded by by a student loan. But on the other hand, there's the argument that, canceling student loans isn't helping the right people at all. And that it just ends up being, derogatory for the economy. And also, in this case, it kind of lets inflation continue to run hot, which is an interesting dynamic there as well. I don't know. I think that the whole student loan complex, has kind of been a scam from the beginning, in getting kids to lever up to get like underwater basket weaving degrees. And, it's really unfortunate, that's happened for a lot of people. But I would be curious to see, how much actual hardship is caused by student loans.
2 points. The first being that, if he does end up waiting to the, call it October, November of this year, that's only going to help the borrowers because the baked in inflation rate is going to be like double digits. And economics 101 is that inflation helps borrowers, hurt savers. So their position is getting rapidly better by the day, arguably like much more tangibly if, the continuing wage gains that folks are seeing continue to materialize. But B, I saw an interesting piece that decomposes the actual inflation vis-a-vis the stated inflation for different subsectors of cost. And unlike how for the past 40 or 50 years where higher education has outpaced inflation in terms of the cost run up, the inflation rate for education today is like 1.5%.
Wait, so you're saying that the inflation rate has come down for education?
Like precipitously, that colleges and universities are feeling the effects or at least seeing a cool off period versus prior eras. And it's catalyzed by, a confluence of factors. The fact that, folks can go to a trade school or straight into the labor force after high school and the opportunity cost of a degree becomes that much greater for them. The fact that a lot of these schools are still in hybrid protocol as of now. And so the justification of paying full freight for a degree that is halfway done through the equivalent of a massively online open course doesn't really check out for, your marginal college entrant.
Right. I think the internet has, totally changed the game for these colleges in that people can either make money through the gig economy or through the creator economy, or they can just learn everything that they would learn in school online for the most part. Now, obviously, there's something to be said that, great professors are great. But how many schools actually have great professors? I would like to, venture that point out there. Clearly, there have been some issues in academia. I think that a lot of, there's just so many subjects where people have, showing that, what they're publishing is really just, fancy abstract words that have no actual grounding in things that are useful for reality. And so, that's probably another thing within it is just that the actual utility of going to school has gone down and to your point, like people are realizing that there's just other alternatives out there. I think another interesting point along this theme is that the percentage of men going to college is way less than females these days. it seems to me like there's a big shift happening there. And there's also just an article out in Bloomberg that was saying that there's like 22 major metropolitan areas where the wage gap has actually flipped and females are now making more than men. And it included like New York City. I would guess that includes LA. But I just think it's a fascinating dynamic in that, are we going into the era where men are oppressed?
Can't wait to take that article to my boss tomorrow and be like, I am a disadvantaged worker. I'm a part of a subset of the population that is marginalized. If you believe in your ESG protocol, I want a 20% raise. The gender gap has fucked me. Well, I fucked it, but comes out the wash.
Oh, so that's what gender gap means. Yeah, no, dude. Why not? Why not try to use that leverage? I'm sure that they would just be like, come on, dude, you're a guy. And I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting. You look at like men have way higher rates of going to prison, way higher rates of failing out of school, way higher rates of suicide across the lifespan. It's an interesting, not that I even want to be a proponent of men's rights at all. That's not what I'm getting at here. It's just interesting to see that there's dynamics that are shifting in the United States, and that it's kind of contrary to what has been, this profound narrative of women empowerment and feminism, which obviously I think is a positive thing overall over the past 40 years. But it is interesting just to see the changing tide.
Yeah. And there is something to be said about how a lot of these wage gains are catch-ups in traditionally male-dominated fields like law, medicine, to a lesser extent, I would assume finance, where the fact that they are even breaking into those circles that are traditionally old guard boys clubs is, something to be lauded. It's the flip side type effects where companies prioritize DEI in making advancement decisions or hiring decisions that feels like the pendulum can get to a point where it swings the other direction. Certainly.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. This DEI stuff, some of it just, it seems a little performative to me. I'm not sure that there's, too many problems that are being solved by that. And I think it's interesting that a lot of companies have kind of started to say like, no more politics at work. That's just not what we do here. Like Coinbase did that. I think Shopify did that. More companies are probably gonna have to start doing that. I mean, it's kind of like what Elon wants to institute at Twitter essentially. And like Tesla's obviously done the same thing. He's trying to say like, hey, like, let's like stop being activists by through our company. And let's start, providing the service that people actually want, which to me is very admirable.
I would love if that became the dominant worldview, at least in office culture where, I don't really give a fuck who you voted for. Like there's unless you work in a government adjacent type role, which frankly, a lot of the economy is now, at least in some form or fashion, reliant on, the different trends that are going on in Washington. But the micro effects of, whether or not you align with your boss's political views, that shouldn't really matter.
Definitely. Yeah, it shouldn't matter. And in fact, I think it's illegal to hire people based on, their political leanings or their ideology. Maybe not. Maybe it's just religion. But at this point, I think that, politics and in some ways, identity politics have become a religion for some people. And it's really replaced, it's interesting. I think that we're in a crisis of meaning in this country. And that, what's happened is that we used to have way more religious people. And now we have way more secular people. And essentially there's got to be something that fills that void. And for a lot of people, it's become checking into, their ideology every day. They get online, they get to, get some points for the things that they say. They get to, be an ally to someone. This is their team. This is what they're on. This is, the sermon that they follow from various people at MSNBC. And then people on the right do it too. Don't get me wrong. There are definitely people who are super devotional, just to like Trump, for example. And it's a really weird thing, but it's kind of, a trend that I expect to see continuing, especially with how popular or how populist ideas have been taking off.
You heard it here first, folks. Elon Musk is the next mega pastor across America, taking his bully pulpit of Twitter and just raining down. He's gonna be like Joel Osteen and not open the Gigafactory when Texas floods.
Elon Musk should definitely go to a mega church and start, talking about like artificial intelligence, and I'm sure that he would do that just for shits and giggles. I mean, it's amazing that I think people still don't understand, even what shit posting is, which is just that you're posting something in a non-serious way to piss people off, essentially. And it's just for shits and giggles. And I don't think people get so like offended and hung up on this stuff when really like there's this meta joke that's going on. And I think we'll be better off if people, start to become more self-reflective on that type of thing.
How optimistic are you that we ever get more self-reflective as a society and not less? Look at us. We're two jokers making a podcast. Like, who gives a fuck about us?
We're going to get real deep and philosophical here, I'm sure, at some point. Who knows when? But yeah,
don't hold your voice, folks.
I'm definitely not bullish on a spiritual reawakening in the United States. I think we tried that in the 60s and it kind of just petered out. Yeah, I don't know. I think that the way that we get back to that stuff is that we, stop getting divided essentially by our politics, and we stop letting the politics become the thing that, that controls like our body's reactions to certain things. Like the fact that people get like so triggered by certain things is not a sign that we need to stop saying certain things because it makes people feel bad. It's that we need to, become more resilient ourselves and, more self-reliant. And I think that that's the only way forward. And if we don't get back to something like self-reliance, what we're going to continue to have is, harder and harder social norms being instituted and more things where it's almost like the Victorian era where they had to like follow these really strict manners, but now you have to follow manners of a different type. And these type are to respect someone's feelings in this very specific way. And it's because of their lived experience or something like that. And it's like, why don't we just take a step back here and get back to the roots of individualism a little bit and get back to the roots of self-reliance. Well, I guess I'm writing the sermon for Elon here.
TLDR, read a Thoreau book or something.
Yeah, Emerson. Yeah. I mean, for real though. I mean, that's kind of the spirit that's been lost in the United States. It's this great tradition that's been left behind. And I think it's unfortunate. I mean, obviously it's not to say that we should, only do things blindly based off ideas that we've used in the past to succeed. But yeah, it's hard to see, where it goes as people get more and more materialistic.
This is a complete deviation, but it's on the subject of, paying more attention in English class. Did you see that the share of the population that read a book last year is down to like multi-generational lows? It's like something ridiculous, like 30%.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. I can't believe that people are not. I mean, I know, I totally believe it. Right. I mean, it's the logical conclusion of an era where everybody, wants instant saturation with clicks and views and short video clips like TikTok. But that's definitely scary. People are stopping to think in like long-term thought and really adopting the dopamine spike.
Still pay attention to long form podcasts. Fingers crossed.
Hopefully, please. If anybody made it this far, congrats.
They definitely just already cohere to all these viewpoints and are looking for the confirmation bias dopamine shot.
That's our crowd, man. These are the people that we're trying to find here, right? We want yes men.
That's where we and Xi Jinping have a lot in common.
As far as the community of scapegoats goes, this is an authoritarian thing. This can be your new religion, folks. This is it.
Raining down from the bully pulpit. We'll pass around the hat later.
Yeah, please tip. Support us on Patreon. No, but for real, I guess if we were to actually talk about, like where we came up with the name of this podcast, some of it comes from the idea of a scapegoat, in that, what people do when there's so much disagreement in society is they look for one thing to, put all of their, murderous desires onto, or their violent desires onto, and just, cast that thing out from society. Which we figured would happen if we recorded ourselves long form like this, which I'm sure it will. But the other part of it is just that we're trying to be the goats of escaping.
We did our practice. Went to a couple escape rooms. We cleared that hurdle without a hunch. We're anointing ourselves the goats at escaping. So this is just the logical next step.
We'll escape from anything, the corporate 9 to 5, ex-girlfriends.
Really, our generation's Houdinis.
That's it. This is it. Scapegoats podcast.
Cue David Bowie.
Yeah, cue David Bowie. Let's see. We got anything else to touch on here? What else is going on?
You want to hit sports?
Yeah, man, I got the Masters going on in this blurred screen behind me. We got Scheffler -11, Smith -7, McIlroy -6. All right.
Do you have a dog in the fight? Are you a Scheffler guy because you went to UT?
Yes, and yes, and because I put money on him.
Nice. Before the tournament.
Yep, 18-1 odds, $15 to win like 270. So I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah, the odds were super wide because he's like the number 1 player in the world. Yeah, it was a great bet if it works out. We'll see.
He looks like an AI generated UT SAE. Like, I refuse to believe he's a real person. Almost on the margins, like he's just a carbon copy of those people, just injected with, I guess, blood from Tiger Woods that they got from his DUI crash.
That's how he got so good this year. It all makes sense. He like doesn't look like an athlete. Like he definitely looks like he's been in a fraternity for a few years and just golfed on the side.
John Daly vibes for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I'm glad he's winning if it means money for me.
This is a great time to also bump our tip us on Patreon side bid. Give us more gambling money.
It's all going into Bovada. All of that money. Sponsor us, Bovada.
Shout out Bovada. Shout out IRS. Shout out TurboTax.
And the SEC while we're at it. That reminds me, I need to do my taxes. Damn.
Really? Isn't that due in like a couple of days?
Yeah, like in a week. They're not very complicated, so it's okay.
It's so wild to me that the modern construct of taxes are like the government is going to keep their records. You have to arrive at your own number, and then you are expected to match their secret number. And if you're wrong, you go to jail.
Yeah. Or you just have to pay like a ridiculous amount of money that comes out of a secret number. It's really weird. And yeah, especially in places like California. I know we've talked about this before, but they have more money than they can actually use right now. It's just not appropriated, and they've like overtaxed people. We don't need to get into tax season too far.
That's definitely where everybody turns us off. It's like these fucking jokers.
No, they're waiting for us to, point out a great deduction. We'll get to credit card points next. Do we mention this was about personal finance?
This is where we get all our affiliate marketing points.
We already got Bovada. Would you like to take out a home equity loan?
Sign up with our curved goats and get 10x your first bet.